Thank you very much, Esther Gidu-Ewart. And of course, next week, we'll be looking at developments in South Sudan. Now, let me come to you, my friend Dawit. You talked about really how the issue that perhaps need to be looked at, frankly, is the issue of security. And yet people will tell you, my brother, that African governments spend lots of amounts of money on buying AK-47s, buying tanks, buying all sorts of weapons. Are they perhaps missing the picture? Because the last time I checked, someone said you can't talk about security, perhaps without talking, frankly, about the root causes of insecurity. And that part of the reason we have this security problem is precisely because governments have not been able to address the fundamental issues, which are socio-economic justice, which are accountability, and in some cases, reconciliation.
It's true. It's very true, Shaka. It's very, very true. That is the underlying issue, the challenges that many governments face. The root causes is easy to see in all African countries, but how do we address that? This is about the issues about governance.
Correct.
It's governance related to corruption. And I was doing some research at some point about trafficking of arms. It's a very complex issue. Sometimes manufacturers of guns, they create the problem so that to sell the guns. So the manufacturers are involved, the shippers are involved, the brokers are involved. So there are so many issues that are involved in gun business. So it is sad that many Africans, because when we talk about security, many African governments see security as regime security. We talk about human security, not regime security. If it's regime security, it's only through guns that you'll be able to provide security to the government. But if we talk about human security in the broader form, it's the migration, it is the food security, it is the displacement of people, it's the economic needs of the people. These can only be addressed through proper governance. But that is, sadly, it's not happening, but it is, I'm quite sure, a discussion that's ongoing discussion in Africa.
Let me go to the lifeline of the show, which are the telephone callers. Good evening, Sam from Uganda. You're most welcome to Straight Talk Africa.
Good evening, Dr. Shaka Ssali. How are you?
I am hugely terrific, except that I happen to be a doctor, but without a clinic.
Okay, let me talk to Dawit. Mr. Dawit, you have talked about security in Africa, which of course goes with economic progress. What do you comment on the Southern Sudan crisis, whereby we were expecting Dr. Machar to arrive in Juba, and all of a sudden, in a tweet of a second, he decided not to go to Juba. Secondly, how can African countries secure long-term loans in order to develop electricity all around the continent, so that they can help the rural people who want to develop? Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much, Sam, too.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Caller. I forgot your name.
Sam.
Yeah, Sam. It is, yes, a problem. I have been to South Sudan. I have worked in South Sudan, and I have really experienced the agony and the poverty of the Southern Sudanese people. They don't deserve what they are getting right now. It is sad, and I fully agree with many people that the problem in South Sudan is the wisdom of the leadership. They have to exercise wisdom for the sake of those extremely poor people who are paying a price because there is a power struggle between 2 and 3 ethnic groups. I think what we need to encourage the leaders is to exercise wisdom and really go beyond their self-interest and address the issues of the people. So it's just, we appeal to the wisdom and intellect of our leaders. The security of our people in Sudan entirely depends on the wisdom exercised by these leaders.
But you know, when you look at the geographical location of South Sudan, you really have to feel sorry for them, because look north, you have Sudan. Look east, you have Ethiopia. Look west, you have Central African Republic. Look southwest, you have DRC. Look south, you have Uganda. You have Somalia within the region, and what have you? Are you surprised at this, despite the fact that South Sudan, actually, in terms of geography, perhaps is much larger than the entire East African community countries combined, except that it will soon, of course, be one of the members itself. And when you look at the human beings there, frankly, there are very few. There is more than enough for everybody.
Absolutely.
Why?
Absolutely. 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 I have not seen a country in Africa that is as rich, naturally, as rich as Congo and South Sudan. Extremely rich. They have all the resources, and they will have no reason at all to fight against each other. But again, we cannot explain, of course, this complex issues surrounding South Sudan has got an effect, definitely. But also the most important responsibility, the most crucial responsibility is the responsibility of the leaders.
The leaders themselves.
The leaders themselves, they are accountable for whatever is happening to the Southern Sudanese people. They are accountable. Of course, there are other factors that play into this, but the most important at this moment is the leadership.
No, when you talk about the leadership, there are some leaders in the region who actually have made a career out of making sure that there is enough violence to go around so that they can stay in power.
Yeah.
They must have read, of course, this English philosopher called John Milton, who wrote in Paradise Lost that I would rather serve in hell than, rather, I would rather rule in hell than serve in heaven. Paradise Lost, John Milton.
Well, that's interesting, very sad, but that seems to be the reality in Africa at this moment, in many African countries. That is sad, yeah.
Well, there are great leaders who make it because there is war. There was once, of course, British Prime Minister Winston Churchill. He was a great war prime minister. When there was no war,
He collapsed.
no job.
Yeah, there's no job, but in a democratic country, leaders give way to another leader, and then there is at least a change of policies. But in Africa, when leaders stay in power for long and change the constitution and stay longer, then that is a serious problem. We can't have change. In South Sudan, that's the problem. In many African countries, that in sub-Saharan Africa, except in southern part of Africa, which is more democratic than many in Central and West Africa. But the problem has always been leadership, leadership, leadership.
But Dawit, you were once, of course, an officer and a gentleman of the Ethiopian army. You were a captain, and I salute you because I was only a lieutenant. You have been a cabinet minister. You are a trained lawyer. You've been a senior United Nations executive. You know, mention it really, you've done it. What is it that can help to explain to an ordinary mind, an ordinary person, why, for example, an individual who becomes a dictator can control millions of people? Why can't these people stand up and say, wait a minute, we can't take this anymore?
Yeah, it's a big question. It's a big question. But again, that's what surprised me also, because the kind of leaders that we see in Africa at this moment are not coming from the jungles. They are not illiterate people. These are people who have well-read, who have probably been educated in one of the Western countries, democratic countries, but when they go back home, when they return home, they become entirely different animals. They start exercising dictatorship. They start exercising contrary to what they have seen and they have been exposed to. That is very sad, but I think psychologists can explain. But again, the major problem is we don't have the democratic institutions and the culture to be able to restrain our leaders, to be able to fight when they refuse to accept the rule of law, to be able to fight them, not necessarily physically, but to fight them and to bring them down when they allow themselves to operate against the constitution. We don't have the democratic institutions. We don't have the culture. That might take some time, perhaps.
You know, it was the current First Lady of the United States, Michelle Obama, who once said that becoming a president does not change you, it reveals you.
That's interesting. That's very good. That's a very good saying.
So some of these people that you think are what you think they are may in fact at the end of the day be political conmen.
Absolutely. I think I agree with that. That's a very good statement. Yeah.
You got it. Well, on that note, thanks to our distinguished guest, Dawit Giorgis, Executive Director of the Africa Center for Strategic Studies. Thanks to our affiliate stations, along with our viewers and listeners, we thank you for tuning in. For many of our Voice of America radio affiliates, Learning English is coming up next. And tomorrow morning, it's Daybreak Africa with James Bate. On behalf of the Voice of America, thanks for tuning in to Straight Talk Africa. In the meantime, get better, not bitter Africa. And please remember to keep the African hopes alive.